Now, I'll be honest in saying the idea that somebody can accidentally buy a car is completely insane. I mean, how does that even happen? And I definitely never thought that I would be a victim of such circumstances, but I was on Bring a Trailer the other day and a buddy pointed out a car with no reserve and then said if nobody else bids on this thing, it's going to sell for way too cheap. So I put in a bid thinking there's no way that I'm going to win this car. And then I accidentally bought a car. So now I own a 1995 BMW 540 6-speed that's going to make the sickest daily driver ever. And within a week of owning it, we transformed it into this. This episode's kind of weirdly timed because Blake and I are out here, and I guess you guys haven't even met Blake yet. Blake has been designing the StanceWorks apparel for a number of years now, and I finally convinced him to leave his job at Eibach to come work for me instead. So now it's Anthony, myself, and Blake, and I'm making him earn his money by peeling vinyl off of the race car because this thing's got to be ready to leave town with its new livery here in like 7 days. So we can't really do an episode on this thing because peeling vinyl is only marginally more interesting than watching paint dry. So I guess I'm just gonna jump the gun. We're gonna do an episode on the E34. Wasn't really ready to show the project off yet, but I'm excited about it, and it feels like a return to my roots. I miss being in a BMW, and I'm relatively sure I can convince some of you that this actually is gonna be the best daily driver ever. But for those of you that are not BMW fanatics, let me provide some context. Before diving into the car that I bought, it's important to understand what this car even is. Introduced in 1988, the E34 5 Series was the third generation of 5, and it follows my all-time favorite car, the E28. It is, by every measure, a family sedan. For many, this car is as unremarkable as it gets, but for some of us, it represents something rather special. Although I'd call the E34's predecessor my favorite car, I would stand by the idea that the E34 is perhaps the most quintessential BMW there is. It is, through and through, what BMW represents in both my heart and my mind. It perfectly straddles elegance, performance, luxury, and an analog driving experience in a way that no car that has followed it really seems to do. Now, I don't expect everybody to agree with me, but that's my pitch. And then when it comes to the M5, that's where BMW really upped the ante. The second generation M5 was fitted with an S38 inline 6 that at its peak was displaced at 3.8 liters. Backed by a 6-speed manual transmission and paired with huge brakes and beautifully designed suspension, the E34 M5 was a super sedan. However, I want to make one argument that perhaps it wasn't the best BMW had to offer for the E34 platform. You see, BMW also offered a car called the 540, which came with a 4-liter V8 that pumped out just shy of 300 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. This rivaled the performance numbers of the M5, but offered a lot more bottom end that got the car moving quickly off the line. In contrast to the 12,000 M5s that BMW hand-built, BMW also produced 3,200 540 6-speed cars. Technically, even more rare than its M5 brethren, it was the ultimate version of an E34 for some, myself included. So, I've been on the hunt for one in the background for a long time. And some of you may remember that a full year ago, I sold off 2 project cars that were near and dear to me. One, my E28 535i, which I called a forever car, and then my E30 S50 swap project, which was my daily driver. Both of these had to go in order for me to afford the F40 shell, but ever since I've been missing driving around in a classic white BMW, but thankfully that has changed. I'd like to introduce the latest project to the StanceWorks shop, a 1995 BMW E34 genuine HE53 540 6-speed. As I'm sure you've realized at this point, this is my accidental Bring a Trailer purchase. It was just going for too cheap, and there was no way I could let somebody else take it home for what it was selling for, and so I threw that bid out thinking there was no chance that would be the final number, but I took it home for just $12,250. Not to say that's not a good chunk of money, because it is, but for what I bought here, I think it's absolutely a steal. This car's been beautifully maintained. The 4-liter M60 under the hood is in incredible shape. It's had everything replaced and serviced, and I could buy with confidence because this car was a customer vehicle from our friends next door at Leichtbau, so it came with all of the receipts and my friend's stamp of approval. Of course, it's a 6-speed car, which made the purchase worth it, but the entirety of the interior is in fantastic shape. Everything's been well cared for, well preserved, and while I wish that it had a black interior instead of parchment, I'm happy to look past it, because look at this thing, it's incredible. And on top of that, to ice the cake, it's got a pretty serious stereo install too, which isn't something I've really had in the past. I'm enjoying it immensely so far. But with the car in hand, there's still one important step before we can make it our own, and that's that this thing desperately needs a wash. I think cleaning it up for the first time is a bit of a rite of passage. When it comes to the cleanup process, we are now well equipped thanks to our friends at Geon. Now, we'll talk about the actual products here in a moment, but before that, I want to talk a little bit about the brand itself and why this segment in particular is important to me. We've worked with a lot of different brands over the years here at StanceWorks, but there are a select few that represent what I'd call the StanceWorks family. I'm really particular about the companies that we fully partner with because I not only have to believe in the company and their products, but they have to understand what it is that we do here too. And honestly, Geon gets it. The entirety of the Geon team has been fans of StanceWorks since the beginning, all the way back when I built Rusty. And when the opportunity to partner up and work together arose, they were eager to jump at it. There are a handful of companies that help support this channel that really make all of it possible, from the projects and the builds to making these episodes for you guys. And each of those brands makes a product that I truly believe in and am willing to put my name behind as a result. Geon has stepped up to the plate to help support this channel and make sure not only are we able to wash these cars, but we're able to pull off all of the projects, the racing, and episodes in between. So, a special thanks to Geon for joining us here at StanceWorks and for helping make this 540 look better than ever. Now let's talk about the wash. Of course, we started with Geon's pre-wash foam. Now, I have never fancied myself as an automotive detailer, so I made sure to read all of the instructions before starting, and I diluted the foam 1 to 5. I let it sit on the car for a few minutes and then, of course, gave it a thorough rinse, which had us prepped to finally give this thing an actual bath.
So, this stuff says shake well before use, but it also says add 20 to 30 milliliters to a 10 to 15 liter bucket. And I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea how much a milliliter is. At this point, I'm too afraid to ask. We're just gonna wing it. 20, 30 milliliters sounds like good enough for me.
The bathe solution is not only pH neutral, so it won't affect any coatings on your car. It's safe for all surfaces, but it also has a lot of lubricity or slickness to it to help avoid any swirl marks or damaging the paint during the scrubbing process. The car gets another rinse, and then, while the panels are still wet, we hit it with Geon's Wet Coat. This is a spray-on solution that helps the hydrophobic nature of the panel and coatings now on the car and keeps the water beading nicely. As soon as we spray this stuff on, we rinse it off as well, and that means the car is finally ready to get dried. Honestly, it's tough for white to show dirt. It's one of the reasons it's one of my favorite colors for a car, but regardless, this thing looks incredible now, and I'm sure that the camera doesn't ever truly showcase it, but short of the full paint correction I want to give this thing in the future, it's hard to imagine that it could look any better. Now, the detailers out there are gonna say, dude, you still gotta do the interior, and you're right, but I wanna give this thing a full-blown interior detailing, so that's coming in another episode. The rest of you are gonna say, you forgot the wheels, but I didn't. I gotta make this car my own, so let me show you what I got. Now that brings us to this stack of boxes right here. I bought the E34 sight unseen. The day after I paid for it, but a week before it actually arrived here, I purchased these wheels. Now, I've had a lot of vintage BMW projects, and across those projects, I've had literally every single wheel I could ever dream of. I've run the gamut, I've had them all, except for what's in this box. This is, in my opinion, the holy grail of vintage BMW wheels, and there's no better car to put them on. Let's get these opened up. Now, I know the thumbnail and the intro already gave the surprise away. I kind of had to in order for this video to work, but bear with me here and just pretend like it didn't happen. Pretend this is a surprise, because this was one of the most exciting unboxings I've ever done. What we have here is a set of genuine Hartka Design C splits. As said, these are more or less the holy grail of vintage BMW wheels. Once upon a time, Hartka was a BMW tuning house, and they made their name shoving huge engines into smaller BMWs and with awesome styling products like these wheels. The BMW guys out there know how rare these are, and you're probably wondering where I got them. Well, that's where OZ Rims from Toronto, Canada comes into play. Believe it or not, OZ Rims had these in stock, ready to build to my specs, along with what seems like every other holy grail wheel in the vintage BMW and Eurocar world. These were built out to 17 by 8.5 ET13 and 17 by 10 ET20 perfect E34 fitment. They feature black barrels, chrome-plated lips, all new hardware, and new center caps, and honestly, I don't think they could turn out any better. These are some of the prettiest restored wheels I've ever seen, so if you're looking for something just as special as these, make sure to check out OZ Rims, because this is hands down as good as it gets. But they do need tires. So, I suppose this is a good time to finally announce that I am officially a driver for Team Falcon. Yeah, we've been working together for years at this point, but now I'm part of the family. Now, there's going to be a lot more on that in an upcoming episode, but for now, all you need to know is that we had to head to the Falcon Distribution Center to pick up tires for our Hartka wheels. While we were there, we also had to take a look around the motorsports division and peek under some car covers. I mean, as to no one's surprise, there's some really cool stuff here. After snagging my RT615K Pluses, we loaded up and went over to our compound, my buddy Dwayne's tire shop. Because he was the right man for the job, I knew I couldn't trust just anyone with these wheels. I had to make sure they were handled with care and didn't receive any damage from getting these tires installed. For tire sizing, I went with a 225/45 for the front and a 255/40 for the rear. Dwayne got us mounted and balanced and then sent us on our way so we can actually get these wheels and tires installed on the E34. For the install, we're back at Leichtbau. These boys were just as excited as I was to see the wheels and tires on the car, and their open lift made this job easier than moving the 308 off of mine. Now, because OZ Rims knows E34 wheel and tire sizing, these wheels are more or less a perfect fit. We installed some small spacers behind them to dial in the fitment, and then of course we adjusted the coilovers to get the ride height perfect. At some point, we're going to have to get some H&R coilovers installed on this thing, but for now, what it has will do the job. Now, it didn't require much fine-tuning. We lowered the front and rear just a touch to get it sitting perfect. And while there's probably room to dial it in a bit more, this is a daily driver and I want to protect these fenders. I'm not interested in making it tough to go over speed bumps, nor do I want to damage the fenders if I were to turn at an inappropriate time. With the car on the ground, we pulled it outside and of course had to step back and take a look. I couldn't be happy with the outcome, and I suppose you guys probably want to see it too.
I'm always going to be an E28 guy, but honestly, I am in love with this car. The factory M-Tech body kit is as good as it gets, and these wheels feel like cheat codes. This is poster-worthy E34 content if you're asking me. I can't imagine this car looking any better than it already does. The V8 sounds incredible, it pulls like a freight train, and it's a ton of fun to drive. I know a lot of you are here for crazy Ferrari content, but cars like this are what got me into cars to begin with, and it's why I will always be a vintage BMW fanatic.
Now, yes, I do actually believe that this is one of the best daily drivers, period, or at least like this class of car, this type of car. I keep coming back to them. As you guys know, and as I mentioned earlier, I sold my E30 that we built on the channel that was meant to be a daily driver so that we could afford the F40, and I'm back in something like this very much on purpose. I know a lot of people are going to say it's insane to try to daily drive a 30-year-old car, especially like a BMW or a German car, but I think that it makes sense, and I'm prepared to justify this completely. First and foremost, this is about as cheap as it gets for a reliable running, driving car with all of the creature comforts that you want, and that is still like an enthusiast car. It's hard to find much under $10,000 these days that's exciting. And I think if we're talking about that $10,000 to $15,000 figure, I genuinely believe it's really hard to buy a car that is more engaging for the driver, more fun to be in, is more pure in a sense. I mean, this is, even though it's a family sedan, it's still an enthusiast vehicle. It drives like one. BMW said this was the ultimate driving machine back in the day, and I kind of believe it. It doesn't mean that it's the best performing car or that it has everything at its peak, but this is a V8 300 horsepower 6-speed manual transmission car that's comfortable enough to literally drive every single day. It can carry 3 passengers, 4 if I really had to. It's got enough power to get out of its own way. It's got cold air conditioning. It's got a great radio. Like, it leaves nothing to be desired from the standpoint of what I want out of a car. And it looks great. Now, that's subjective. Some people look at this car and they're going to say that is a really boring car. And that's fine. That part's up to you. Pick something else. Point being, this checks all the boxes, perhaps minus reliability. But I'm going to argue that cars like this, these old BMWs from this era, truly are some of the best built cars, period. It doesn't mean that they are truly bulletproof. This thing's going to need stuff. BMW cooling systems are notoriously crappy. We're gonna get this thing fitted with a CSF radiator. But overall, for the most part, this thing's likely just to leak on the garage floor more than anything else. It's very unlikely to leave me stranded. I didn't hesitate to buy a car with 213,000 miles on it because I know it's going to keep going for probably another 100,000 miles before I have to think about doing anything about it. And when I want to do something about it, a replacement engine is probably $500. It doesn't cost anything. These are great cars. I think this makes for an incredible driving platform. It's something fun. I could take this to the track if I wanted to. I could go have some fun. I could take it to autocross. I can take it to a car show. I can just lend it to somebody because it's completely tame, usable, drivable. It's hard for me to imagine what makes a better daily driver unless you're somebody who is afraid to have a vehicle that is potentially unreliable. I think that's kind of the trade-off. Do I need to own this with the understanding that, yeah, it very easily could break on me? I'm gonna have to have something else to drive, or I'm gonna have to be prepared to rent a car in the interim. Sure, whatever. That's a risk I'm willing to take as an enthusiast and as somebody that is mechanically inclined. And if that's not you, I don't know why you're watching this channel.
So there you go. That's my pitch. I think cars like this make for the best dailies possible. Is it perfect? No. Is it foolproof? Absolutely not. Is it the fastest or most comfortable or best handling car out there? In no way, shape, or form. But it's a ton of car for the money, and it is a blast to drive. It is quintessentially why I love cars like this, and it's a reminder of why I've become a car enthusiast. Yeah, sure, a new car basically checks every box but better, but this is the kind of car for me.